Madam Chancellor, colleagues, graduands, and honored guests, I am pleased to present Zita Cobb for an honorary degree. Zita Cobb was born in Joe Bat's Arm, Fogo Island, Newfoundland. She lived on this island of 2,500 people throughout her childhood, steeped in rural and maritime life. One notable event during her youth was the arrival of electricity on the island. As of 1972, a bare light bulb operated by a chain was the major technological innovation on Fogo Island. In 1975, at the age of 16, Zita Cobb left Fogo Island for the very first time. Destination? Carleton University. By her own account, Carleton was an amazing place. It had light switches. However, the bus ride to campus on the old number 7 bus was, at least initially, an epic and terrifying journey. She took a degree in commerce and worked in the Calgary oil patch for the first decade of her career. In 1989, she moved back to Ottawa to work with the 4 founders of a relatively new high-tech company, JDS. Her role at JDS was all things non-tech. She was the glue that kept things together, both financially and in other ways, as the company enjoyed spectacular success. In 2001, at the age of 43, Zita Cobb retired from JDS Uniphase as its Senior Vice President, Strategy. As you can imagine, this role in a dynamic technology company involved long days, many of them spent in windowless meeting rooms. But throughout her conventional business career, Zita Cobb persistently followed her determination to experience different parts of the world. She spent a year in Africa and a year in Costa Rica during this period. Following her retirement in 2001, she went sailing to experience new places and cultures and feel the wind in her face once again. She established a philanthropic foundation to work in Africa, a continent to which she remains very committed. In 2005, Zita Cobb moved home to Fogo Island. Her life experience had led her to realize that she had a passion for learning from, preserving, and building on ways of knowing among people engaged with the natural world. This has been the anchor for her work on Fogo Island, as well as internationally. Reflecting on her more conventional business career and her current focus, she is fond of quoting Joni Mitchell to say that she too has looked at life from both sides now. Zita Cobb's work on Fogo Island is done through her Shorefast Foundation. Its focus is to preserve traditional knowledge and enable cultural vitality. Shorefast does this by supporting the contemporary arts, fostering the development of businesses on the island, and by providing connections between Fogo Islanders and those from away. A key enabler for building these connections is the new and spectacular Fogo Island Inn. I will conclude my introduction with a brief story about Zita Cobb's work. As we all hope that all good philanthropists do, she established 2 scholarships for young people from Fogo Island to go to university. At the event to celebrate this, one of her fellow islanders stood up and said, "Why are you paying our young people to leave? Why not help create opportunities for them to stay?" And so she has. Zita Cobb's work exemplifies the importance of understanding ways of knowing in rural places and the use of business to make things better there. Madam Vice Chancellor, in recognition of her exceptional career as an entrepreneur and for her outstanding commitment to philanthropy, I request that you confer the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa upon Zita Cobb.
By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Governors and on the recommendation of the Faculty Senate, I hereby award you the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa. Congratulations, Dr. Cobb.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Graham. Madam President, Vice Chancellor, Chairman of the Board, distinguished members of the university, fellow graduates, parents, and guests. It is a huge honor for me to receive this honorary degree from Carleton. As Professor Graham said, in 1975, was actually a few days after my 17th birthday, filled with great fear and a little tiny bit of excitement, I took that number 7 bus down Bank Street for the first time to start my degree here. A lot has changed since that day. A lot has changed in my little life, and a lot has changed in the big world. But I'm really happy to see that the number 7 still runs down Bank Street, and maybe some of you arrived that way today. I had arrived here, as Professor Graham said, from Fogo Island, which is a very magical and mystical island off the northeast coast of Newfoundland. It's one of Canada's oldest settlements, our Irish and English ancestors having come here 4 centuries before I was born to fish for cod. In 1975, the world outside of Fogo Island was known to me only in my imagination. And maybe everyone thinks that their young lives were idyllic, but mine really was. In that tight-knit community of fishing people and sealers, I grew up feral. I grew up understanding that community meant relying on each other, relying on other people, needing other people, struggling together, and carrying on even though we didn't always get along. And in spite of the many disagreements, obstacles, and frustrations, that community navigated the waters of intimacy and antagonism with deep humanity. Making a living on the North Atlantic requires daily acts of imagination and courage. It was an almost cashless society when I grew up. Things have changed. And it was held together by a web of gifts. And isn't that what community means? A web of gifts. As modern urban people, we often forget this important idea and confuse real community with a group of people who share a common interest, not a common fate. Anyway, after 400 years of a perfectly sustainable inshore fishery, our lives were thrown into a terrible limbo by the collapse of the fishery. This was caused by the industrialization of the fishery, by monstrous-sized vessels equipped with technology that not even a codfish could overcome. In 1968, when I was 10, the inshore fishery, the only livelihood we had ever known, was no longer viable. My own father's heart was broken by the breaking of the cod, and seeing no possibility for his children to survive on our island home, he concluded that we had no choice but to get an education. And that's what brought me here to Carleton. And that's what has informed much of what I have done with my life since then. Of course, I studied business because I wanted to understand what system, what thinking brought those vessels to our shores. We often wondered about the men on those big boats. Who were they? Were they here so far from their own homes because they were hungry and needed to eat? And of course, they were. They were just like us in that regard. But they were part of a bigger, I would say more sinister system that was less about eating and more about hoarding. But let me come back to that thought a bit later. After Carleton, as I worked and traveled, I began to see the world as a cauliflower. With all those little florets, Fogo Island is a floret, whole and beautiful in its own way, and connected to a whole lot of other lovely little florets that are loved by other people and other cultures. I came to see that the work I'd chosen for my career was spent in the connective tissue that held all the little florets together, the stem. That's our industrial systems of commerce and technology. I came to see my own father was right, that it wasn't the fish that let us down, it was the connective tissue that had let us down. It had become too self-serving and therefore had caused great destruction for the fish and the culture of our little floret and many, many others like it. But of course, that isn't surprising when you consider that these systems were developed at a time nobody thought about or maybe even cared about the well-being of our ecological or cultural capital, which Charles Eisenstein, in his wonderful book called Sacred Economics, calls sacred capital. The blindness, willful or otherwise, that brought the cod to the brink of extinction and destroyed much sacred capital in the quest for financial capital has grown in size and force since I was 10 years old. The good news, and it is very good news, is that we see it now. Last year, KPMG published a report called Expect the Unexpected, outlining 10 sustainability megaforces, 10 interconnected, unpredictable megaforces that we urgently have to grapple with. The report concludes that, and I quote, "The transition to a sustainable economy is possible, but it requires widespread global support from business, governments, and civil society." This is pretty heavy stuff. That this transition is possible, but it won't happen all by itself. It needs each and every one of us. There is so much talk these days about sustainability that the word has almost lost its meaning. Maybe resilience is a better word, and maybe it is in fact a very simple concept. The simple act of living in the rhythm of opposites that is life itself, living our lives in an active act of balancing. This requires us to pay very close attention to the impact of all of our actions, to be fully aware, to live knowing that there is only one system, lots of florets, but only one cauliflower. We need to act quickly to acquire much more systems literacy, to have the attentional flexibility to see and respect the small sacred parts that are impacted by the system and that are impacted by our individual actions and our individual choices. We need, in millions of small and large acts, quoting Buckminster Fuller, to build a new model that makes the old one obsolete. This is not about revolution. It's about acute awareness, conversations, relationships, and choices and actions, big and small. And when we think about capital, we need to be thoughtful about the many forms of capital: social capital, cultural capital, natural capital, and maybe even spiritual capital, and of course, economic capital. My ex-colleague and good friend used to say, the most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing. And isn't that nature and culture, the two great garments of human life? Isn't that what makes life possible and joyful? We have the wonderful tools of business and technology that can be used in the service of nature and culture. We just need to get better at using them properly to keep the most important thing the most important thing. We need to invest in public good, in the commons, in sacred capital. Money is a wonderful tool that is useful to facilitate exchange, and it quickly becomes problematic when we start to hoard it and obsess about growing it, to the detriment of the most important things. We have more than enough evidence of what happens when we strip mine sacred capital in order to create more financial capital. The plague of sameness that this has brought to our communities is brutal, and the destruction it has brought to the fabric of the earth itself is terrifying. So we just have to stop doing it. And we need to be always very, very careful about our relationship with money. We can build an economy that is built on cooperation, not competition, and on circulation, not hoarding. Maybe by financial measures, that economy won't grow a lot. Maybe not at all. Maybe it doesn't need to. But our lives will grow. My father used to say, and he really meant it, I don't care what you feel, I don't care what you think, I only care what you do, because it is only your actions that impacts others. And I have to say, liking a Facebook page for an organization trying to do some good does not suffice as action. As we rise to the urgency of building new operating models that bring a better balance between money and well-being, we need to be respectful of and give a strong voice to all of our human ways of knowing. We know things from our schooling, of course, but we mustn't lose sight of what we know culturally, what we know through artistic processes, and, of course, through our ecological intelligence. Even though most of us are urban people now, there are still those remaining, rural people, who live deeply entangled with the natural world, who know things that the rest of us don't know. We must seek them out, listen to them, and help them hold on to their ways of knowing, for all of our sakes. Because what each and every one of us, each and every one of you does today influences the outcome. And one small change for the better changes everything for the better, because there's just one system, one cauliflower, and we all have the gift of belonging to it. I wish you the very best from here. Use all of your human ways of knowing to pay attention, spend time outside, bend down to the natural world, lead with your hearts, and in spite of the cynics, the critics, and the broken people, stake your lives in the possible. Take really good care of those little florets and be part of creating better connective tissue to hold them all together. Don't allow our sacred cultural and natural capital to be completely dismantled and turned into financial wealth, but rather do it the other way around. I want to leave you with a paragraph from Barry Lopez's book, Arctic Dreams. The individual's dream, whether it be so private a wish as that the joyful determination of nesting Arctic birds might infuse a distant friend weary of life, or a magnanimous wish that a piece of scientific information wrested from the landscape might serve one's community. In individual dreams is the hope that one's own life might not have been lived for nothing. The very much larger dream, that of a people, is a story we have been carrying with us for millennia. It is a narrative of determination and hope that follows a question. What will we do as the wisdom of our past bears down on our future? It is a story of ageless conversation, not only conversation with ourselves about what we mean and wish to do, but a conversation held with the land, our contemplation and wonder at a prairie thunderstorm, or before the jagged line of a young mountain, or the sudden rise of ducks from an isolated lake. We have been telling ourselves the story of what we represent in the land for 40,000 years. At the heart of the story, I think, is a simple abiding belief. It is possible to live wisely on the land and to live well, and in behaving respectfully toward all that the land contains, it is possible to imagine a stifling ignorance falling away from us. Thank you very much.